right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to another video. All right. So, from where I started, I took off the last video. We're talking about the 3D space and trying to understand 3D and CAD, CGI, and stuff like that. So, in this video, we're going to be going down to some requirements. I think in the last class, because we're on a physical class. No, sorry, an online class closed on Telegram while running this course at the same time. So in the class, I had begun to explain some things, which I'm going to be explaining here. Maybe a little more detail, so this video might be a little bit long or not. Well, let's see how it goes. All right, so we have some items to look at, and that is first of all two things based on our curriculum, and that is we're going to be looking at the requirements and installation. All right, so first of all, I would like to let you know that out there, most people would want to use, these days people are using their phone for graphic design and a lot of things. So some persons saw this course and thought they actually were going to do it with their mobile phones. All right. So I'm not saying you can't do 3D with your mobile phone, but you cannot do effective 3D with your mobile phone. All right. So there are many, easy softwares out there that will help you with that, but this course is not designed for that. All right. So I'm sorry about that. All right. So, but the first requirement that you need is a PC. All right. So we'll be going through some basic requirements that you need, and then we'll be going through, some other things. All right. So I'd like to approach like this. All right. So if you have a PC, one of the things I will strive to do in this course is to bring you up to speed if you are a novice in some things. All right, so I have a little bit of tech background, so I'll be shedding a little bit of light to some things that are not directly visualization related, but they are knowledge that will help you because no knowledge is wasted. All right, so I'll just go straight into the thing. All right, so requirements. So if you check, every software that is produced by a producer always have their info page where you get to see the different kinds of requirements, minimum requirements, recommended requirements. So I'll talk about minimum and recommended requirements. All right. Minimum requirements are worst case scenario use. Like, okay, if you don't have what the software would work best on, you should use minimum. Or better yet, a recommended requirement of hardware is more or less like the hardware that, according to the developers of the application, that would best run the application in its perfect condition, right? So, there are some applications, or most of the times games. You see this very effectively with games. Games have minimum requirement and it has a recommended requirement. If you play a game with a recommended requirement, the game will be awesome. You enjoy it, as most especially when it's PC games. You enjoy it when you have the hardware requirements met. If you have below the hardware requirements, you begin to notice things like performance lag, graphics not measuring up and stuff like that. So those are things, these are just like a basic understanding on that level for what a recommended requirement is and the minimum requirement. Minimum requirement, simply like I've said, is just what is the lowest device I could use to run this thing. That's all. All right. So that being said, we're going to be looking at how we can quickly, on any Windows laptop, look up the specs. You of course could want to use a MacBook, but I wouldn't be covering that because I don't use Mac. All right. So, but I'm pretty sure you could find a video out there that will explain to you how to check your specs on Mac, or better yet, when you got your Mac, you could know your specifications right off the bat. But most people may not be able to know what specs they have. Some could just, go to a shop and get a laptop and not really know, because there's also that. All right, so that being said, let's look at how to check your specs. All right, so when you go to your Windows button, you could just type DX DIAG. All right, so when you type that DX DIAG, it brings up this thing that has an X. All right, it's called DirectX Diagnostic Tool. All right, what that does is it runs a scan on your PC, or more like a software that runs a scan on your PC. Comes with every Windows operating system. It just runs a scan. They're scanning. it will run a scan on your PC, check all the needed basic hardware that we need to see. All right. So this tool reported details information about direct components and drivers installed on your system. All right. So here you can basically see an overview of all your hardware. So I can see the personal name I gave my laptop. I can see the particular Windows I'm running, the build. I can see the language that my region is set. I can see the manufacturer of my PC, which is HP. I could see the model, which is HP EliteBook X36010 G2 is actually a touchscreen, so I could actually use my finger. All right. So the BIOS, the processor, all right, the processor, the memory, all right. So in the class, I began explaining something about memory, all right. I think this is also where I would start explaining that. Now we have two kinds of memory that you need to take note of. I mean, there are actually okay, so this is not like a computer class, so but we need to understand some of these basic things for us to be able to better you know understand some things that we'll be doing in visualization, because when you need to get a new gadget or a new hardware for the purpose of visualization, if you don't understand this, you could just shortchange yourself by getting something that is not sufficient enough. All right, so that's why we need to look into this, and it's added skill. All right. So that being said, when we talk about memory, when I was in secondary school, short quick story, more primary secondary school, they taught us about RAM and ROM, and that was one of the most wrongest knowledge I've gotten when I was much young. What they taught about RAM and what they taught about ROM was slightly, itchy here and there. But what they taught us was that RAM means random access memory and ROM means read-only memory. Not inaccurate, but the inaccurate part of that teaching was that your room is actually your storage. And I kept trying to reason, like, how does read only memory translate to storage? I mean, it means you can only read it, because the concept of read and write means you can only take and you can only write. You can either take or write, or for stuffs that have read and write, that means you can read and write. That's like what enables you to copy and delete stuff from something. If you find out there are disks, you can't delete things from some disks. Some disk, it's permanently bonded to it, and that's permanent. That means it's not a rewritable disk. It means it's only a writable disk. So when you write to it, you can only read from it. All right. So, but on a very simple terminology, what that means is what I just want to clarify here is that your room is not your storage. All right. We're always told that room is storage, but room means read only memory, which is memory that can only be read. All right, so memory that can only be read are usually used by your hardware, your components. For example, my mouse, you can see my mouse here. My mouse knows what the right click is and what the left click is, what the middle mouse button does. I don't reprogram it. I can only right click. And each time I right click, the computer knows what is in the memory that it needs to trigger, which is a right click. All right. If that's complex, you can look up a video, but on that level, I think that's basic enough. All right. So, but the point there is your read-only memory are used by devices like this, your monitor, different other things, so that you could actually, so that but it's none of our business. It's majorly business of the manufacturer, so that they can put the basic things that the components needs to function. All right. So, but what we use is actually storage. It's just called storage because that's where we store our files and everything. To have RAM, ROM, and storage, right? Why I had to explain all that was because just to remove any form of confusion, right? So, but under memory, they're all those three things I mentioned are all kinds of memory or storage, all right? So we have the RAM. The RAM is actually the place where your computer stores every bit of memory before it processes it, all right? It makes it easier for the computer to access the data from for the CPU. There's a CPU, there's a central processing unit, all right? It makes it easy for your CPU to access the data and then process it, all right? That's why we have RAM. Whatever you are doing, you're working on a Photoshop file, you're working on a Illustrator file, a SketchUp file, whatever you're doing, it takes bits of it to the RAM and processes and gets the information from the RAM to the CPU for processing. All right. So when it's done processing, it releases it from the RAM and stores it in your storage. That's like the basic process. All right. So why that is important is your CPU is the central processing unit that processes everything that you do on your PC. All right. So, but what you need to know about that is that when you have when you want to come into rendering, there is an introduction of another processing unit. All right, central processing unit does major calculations and all that. I mean, in the past, they usually also do graphics processing. Even I think I don't know how they implement the CPU GPUs, but I think it comes in that. So, but the point I'm trying to make there is that there is another processing unit for graphics, because that is where we are interested in. There's another processing unit for graphics, which is called your GPU. All right, you must have had GPU before. So what your GPU is the processing unit that handles graphics processing for your 3D renderings and everything like that. So when you don't have a GPU, you find out that it will become almost impossible for you to render. Of course, not impossible, but you could actually still render using your CPU depending on the rendering engine you are using, but GPUs were made to take the load of rendering away from the CPU and have a standalone processing unit for doing that. All right. So that's why I had to explain this. So for the RAM, your normal RAM, 6 gig RAM, 8 gig RAM, 16 gig, stuff like that, that is used by your CPU. All right. So, but when you have a GPU, because not all computers have a GPU, right? So, but when you have a GPU, your GPU has its own RAM. That's where the word VRAM comes in. You might have had VRAM before, or video RAM, all right, or graphics card. When you hear graphics card, it's referring to the CPU, the GPU itself, the whole GPU component. That's what we refer to as a graphics card, all right? So either they call it GPU, graphics card, and whatever name, those are all synonymous. They mean different things, but they are all synonymous to refer to your graphics processor. All right. So that being said, we just need to know that there is a graphics processor and then there is a normal processor. And your graphics processor has its own RAM and your normal processor has its own RAM. All right. We'll see some of that as we continue. All right. So under memory, I have 16 gig of RAMs on these PCs. That's why you're seeing it in megabytes. All right. So that's 16 gig RAM is what I have here. And then I don't really know what this is. And well, DirectX has to do with your graphics. It's part of the things that Windows PC uses to process graphics and stuff like that. I'm not too educated on that part, but I just want to give you a basic overview, so that you know what you're doing. All right. So when you run the DirectX Diagnostics tool, it does a quick scan on your PC to get the various drivers. That's why it gets all this information. Now, when you come to the display, which is where we are interested in for this video, you need to, if you listen to what I was explaining, I explained that we have a graphics processor and a central processing unit. All right, that's a GPU and a CPU, right? So why that is important is when you come to display, this is where you see what has to do with display. Graphics is your display, right? That's graphics, all right? So here we see that I have a name Intel Graphics 620, right? What that means is I have a GPU, yeah. I have a graphics card, I have a GPU on my laptop, right? But I can see that under display memory, right? Display memory is your video RAM, the amount of RAM that was allocated, dedicated specifically for your video card or your graphics card, all right? Those are all the same thing, all right? So for your video card or your graphics card, and what was dedicated here is 128 megabytes, all right? Some systems don't even have a graphics card, talk more of even having a dedicated memory, all right? So I just want you to know that if you do not have a graphics card, what that means is you'll be highly limited, all right? For example, this display is very low, like it's very low and not advised for visualization, all right? It's very low and not advised for visualization. All right. So, but here we have shared memory, and shared memory is where we have what we have under shared memory is your RAM. You remember the RAM for your CPU, right? Your normal RAM. Those RAM is actually some part of it is shared for your GPU to be able to use it to process. All right. So when you have a system and you're seeing shared memory, don't be too excited because shared memory is not as effective as your dedicated display memory. All right. So having a dedicated graphics card just means you have a graphics card that is specifically for this purpose of graphics rendering. All right. That being said, I think that's on a basic level. So I'm going to show you after I do another illustration on my big laptop. so you could see the graphics card, because on my bigger laptop I have that's my rendering PC. I have it's actually a gaming PC, but I use it for rendering, right? So, but I have 6 gig worth of NVIDIA RTX 2060. I think RTX 2060. I'm not really certain, but when I do that on a video, you see that, all right? But the main point there is this is how you check your graphics card, and those are the basic things you need to know. And I mean, they can be technical in trying to understand them, but at least the knowledge is not all that wasted, all right? So that being said, these are basic other information, but this display memory is the most important thing. So when you don't see a display memory, it means you don't have a dedicated graphics card. All right. So this is sound and input. These are other information that we don't have any business with. All right. So this is how you check your own PC requirements. All right. You check your own PC to see what your PC can do. All right. So you can see my processor. This is the processor speed. Yeah, this is the processor speed, and it can overclock to this, I think, and I have 4 CPUs inside. All right. So why we looked at all these things is so that we can now go and